Carlos, I never thought you would make it past the prep line. Finesse isn't for everyone.
Sometimes the food you despise becomes the new gold standard in town, chef.
Carlos Hernandez had been staring at the Michelin Guide notification on his phone for 5 minutes, unable to believe what he was reading. He was 39 years old, standing in his own restaurant kitchen in Chicago, and the email confirmed that Bella Luna had just received 2 Michelin stars. 7 years ago, Carlos was a line cook at Avellini, a high-end restaurant where chef-owner Thomas Drake treated him like he was replaceable. Thomas mocked Carlos's accent, called his family recipes peasant food, and when Carlos suggested a dish modification one night, Thomas laughed in his face and told him to stick to chopping vegetables because creative cooking required sophistication Carlos would never have. Last year, Thomas saw Carlos struggling to carry groceries after a double shift and offered him a job as a dishwasher, saying it was more Carlos's speed anyway. Carlos quit that night and used his savings to open a tiny restaurant serving the Mexican-Italian fusion food his grandmother taught him growing up in both Mexico and Naples. The restaurant barely survived its first year, but food critics started noticing. Then a write-up in the Tribune brought lines around the block. Tonight was the official Michelin celebration dinner, and Thomas Drake had somehow gotten a reservation under a different name. Carlos watched from the kitchen as Thomas sat down, clearly not recognizing the restaurant as his former line cook's place. Carlos personally prepared Thomas's tasting menu, putting his heart into every dish, the same recipes Thomas had called peasant food. When Thomas asked to meet the chef to offer compliments, Carlos walked out in his chef whites. The color drained from Thomas's face instantly. His date asked if they knew each other, and Thomas stammered something about old colleagues. Carlos stood at the table with quiet dignity and thanked Thomas for the years of criticism that taught him his food did not need Thomas's approval to be extraordinary. He mentioned that Avellini had recently been dropped from the Michelin Guide entirely while Bella Luna just earned 2 stars. Thomas's face went from pale to red with embarrassment. His date Googled both restaurants right there at the table, reading aloud that critics called Bella Luna revolutionary while Avellini was described as stale and derivative. Thomas tried to say he always knew Carlos had potential, but Carlos simply smiled and walked back to his kitchen. Thomas paid his bill and left without finishing dessert. Avellini closed 8 months later, unable to compete with the changing food scene. Carlos now owns 3 restaurants and mentors young immigrant cooks. He never forgot being told his food was not sophisticated enough, and he made sure every dish proved that sophistication comes from the heart, not from looking down on others. Sometimes the line cook you dismiss becomes the chef everyone wants to work for.